Okay.
Welcome back. I'm Beth Rolls, and today I'm joined by my friend Nicole Lupashansky. I already butchered her name. I'm so sorry.
You did great.
And she is a transformation, co-parenting, and divorce coach. And I'm excited to talk to her about reality star and business just empire. She's created a whole empire. Bethany Frankel recently talked about her divorce from Jason Hoppy. And I just want to get her perspective because, Nicole, you help women leave these marriages that aren't working for them, and you have experience of your own leaving a couple times, right? So relationships that weren't really serving you or your kids. And you also, I think, have a financial background. So you've got all this insight. And I just want to pick your brain today about what you thought about what she shared, what she could have done differently. I had lots of opinions about, well, she shouldn't have even done it to begin with, because there's things that could have maybe prevented it, but I don't really know because neither of us are there. We're just, what we saw on TV and what we're hearing from her sharing. But tell me a little bit more about like who you really work with, what you do, and why you do this work.
Okay. So starting off talking just about a little bit about myself, I am a co-parenting and divorce coach, and I support parents to reduce the psychological and emotional effects of parental separation on children, even when the other parent is not on the same page.
So hard.
The reason that I got into this work is because, first of all, I don't think that the universe or God, my higher being, put me through over a decade of experience in family courts in my own personal life and going through that, and then co-parenting in high conflict, not to become a better person and change. This makes me a little emotional, but change things for my children.
Yeah.
So the first divorce that I had was tough. That was a little bit more of a physical abuse. So that's easier to see, I think, and say, okay, that's not acceptable.
Right.
And no matter how much I'm in love with this person, this isn't okay for my children. And we tried, I want to put it out there, we tried counseling, we tried therapy. It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so we went through a divorce for a year, and that was hard just because of what was at stake, your children.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until my second divorce that I really learned the lesson of I'm the common denominator here. What person am I attracting? And how am I showing up in my relationships, especially in this area?
Yeah.
And so when I divorced my second ex-husband, it was because of emotional and verbal abuse. And that was a lot harder for me to unravel myself from.
Oh, yeah. That's not cut and dried. Like, he's hurting me right
It's
now.
not, because I can say this. He can be an amazing person. Amazing. And then there's this other side of him that's got some wounds. He was traumatized, not for me to speak about other than that. But so I can understand where it comes from, which makes it harder to unravel from, I think, because it's harder to decipher, is it okay or is it not okay? So when you put your hand in a fire and it burns, you know to take it out. And I think that that is more relevant to physical abuse. But I think when emotionally you have this arguing and mitigation, it's not as easy to see. And I will take full accountability for joining in on the arguing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think
Women are so good at alleviating discomfort for other people. So you could see his wounds and it's like, oh, but I'm not a good person if I don't help him through this, even when we're being hurt. It's so challenging.
and he was my husband and the father to my child. And to this day, I want him to be the best version of himself.
Yeah.
That will never change. And that is what I want for women that go through what I do, to feel for somebody that they look at as their enemy. But the reason that I want them to do it is for their children, not just for themselves. Because when you look at your child and you know that I brought you into this, I made this decision, I'm accountable and I have some responsibility to try to do everything I can to make this the best situation possible for you. And that sounds counterintuitive, because I will say, let go of the control and things like, don't take things personal. But
yeah,
back to why I started really was, I just knew that I wanted my children to have not the stereotypical situation that everybody says you will have when you get divorced. Oh, he's going to be a jerk and you guys are going to hate each other and it's going to be miserable and your life's just going to suck for the next 10 or 15 years. Like, and that just wasn't an option for me. So that's when I stuck my head in a library. I started certifying myself as a coach and taking other courses and really trying to understand personalities and attachment styles and why we are the way we are and what I could do to make it better for my children.
Nicole, did you have a good model of healthy relationship growing up? Did your parents stay together?
So my father loved my mother to pieces. My parents divorced after 17 years when I was about 6 years old. My mother was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And he was a workaholic.
Everybody was busy with their own things, weren't they?
They were. And then my father remarried to my stepmom. That was amazing. She taught me a lot. She was by no means perfect, but she taught me a lot. And they got divorced after about 4 years.
Okay. So 2 divorces.
Yep. Exactly. 2 divorces. So interesting, right?
Yeah. I don't know about
I'm divorced
you.
twice.
You're divorced twice. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I know my parents' divorce was like, it was like a murder. Like, I just grieved our family so much. Did you feel that kind of grief both times or no?
So the first time, I remember hearing my mom on the phone with another man. So I was happy for some reason, because in my heart, I just wanted my parents to be happy. And there was a lot of fighting going on. And I didn't care to be around my mother.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough by the time I was 9 to have my father be able to take me in. And yeah, that was great. But that's when I grieved, is when I lost my stepmom.
Okay. Yeah.
That was, and we still have a relationship. It's very minimal. We don't talk a lot, but enough that we know we love each other. And, but that was harder because I had a pretty good life. It wasn't chaotic. They didn't fight in front of me a lot. Instead, I was going to, she worked for a news station. So I was going to dinner with the news reporters and the weatherman and charity functions. And I learned how to give to the community, that was important.
Oh, wow.
So that was harder for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I think that would be a whole different world if my parents had found like a healthy person, but because they didn't do their work, they didn't go that direction so much. Or we weren't around it. My dad actually did remarry, so no offense to her, but we just weren't around it that much. So I
Okay.
think, thank you for sharing your
sorry.
story. I just wanted to see where you were from, because I know that motivates. I know it motivates my work, and I bet it motivates yours as well. So Bethany, I took it really personally when she divorced Jason, because I had watched her on her show get pregnant, have the quick wedding. He seemed like such a loving guy. And the truth was that I thought that my relationship with my husband was so similar to hers. So when she wasn't good, sorry, I don't know, it's blowing up on my computer. When she left him, I think at an unconscious level, I was like threatened by it. Like, well, why was hers bad? That must mean that mine's bad, and what's going to happen with mine, kind of thing. Although I didn't really realize that. But I was so upset that she left, and I just couldn't imagine what was going on. And then you heard in the news that she was having this really hard, strenuous divorce, and it sounded like he was a whole different person who was like stalking her, and she just didn't talk about it that much. So then she shared in this interview that the divorce took 9 years and it only just was finished, and that he wouldn't leave her house and was just in her space all the time, and she couldn't leave the house because her finances weren't settled or something, and so she was just avoiding him. And she spoke about emotional abuse and like stalking almost, and it's like, who is this guy? It's hard to believe. So what I really was wondering, I made you listen to it, sort of, or you agreed to listen to it. Like,
Yeah.
is there anything you heard from that? Like, what would you have told her if she was your client to not go through that hell?
So first, I want to honor and respect her, that I don't know her situation because I was not there.
Right.
And I want to respect and honor that she has her own feelings, and that is her perception. I did not watch any of the previous show or know anything about her marriage in the news or anything like that. With that said, when I listened to her podcast, I think she could have came to that podcast, and I say this lovingly, but I think she could have presented it in a different manner and it would have been heard differently. I think that podcast was made while she is still healing.
Yeah, I agree.
And when you're in that deep wounded place, you want to share with the world because you want to help protect other people. And I can only imagine that she believes, because I listened to her and she said, I had to share this.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's saying, I want to protect you.
Yep.
What I didn't hear in the podcast, and what I didn't hear from what you just said about what you saw, was accountability. I didn't hear her talk about how she showed up.
Oh, yeah.
See, it's not just one person. I participated with my exes, and I have to be responsible for that. Doesn't mean I'm responsible for his actions, but I am still partly responsible. And I just didn't hear that in her podcast. Did you?
No, it's like you said, it sounds like she's really processing what happened. And she was somebody who was very transparent about her own. She had a mom that wasn't really there for her in the way she needed, and then a stepdad. And she went to therapy on her reality show. She would air her
Oh,
sessions with her
okay.
therapist. And you could tell that she was going through so much. And I think that he soothed a lot of those wounds for her. But yeah, she didn't really, I'm in agreement with you that we co-create the relationship dynamic itself. And yeah,
I think you know a lot more about her than I do. You asked me to listen to a podcast. I did. And that's the reality of when you put a podcast or a video or write on YouTube, anything, we have to put it out there knowing that somebody might not know anything about us.
right.
And they're looking up to us for just this one 15, 30-minute, hour time frame that they're giving to us to say, what should I do? And there were some things that she said in there that I didn't feel were fair to those who are going through divorce or thinking about going through divorce.
Right.
One of those things is she said, don't be so trusting.
Yep.
Hmm.
What do you think?
So when you have higher expectations of somebody, you set the bar here, they'll try to meet it. So why not raise that bar so that they meet it? And I can say from my own experience that in every relationship that I've had that has worked, not because you're changing the other person, maybe they're changing a little bit, they don't know it, or maybe they do. But when we change our behaviors, then others only have the choice to change theirs, right?
Right.
So that's a whole nother topic, but I'm trying to think of what else that she said. Oh, what I said, and this is what I wrote in my notes, is that we have to trust in something greater than us. Be vulnerable and take a leap of faith. So I'm going to say, look within yourself and trust yourself. And maybe that's what she meant to say, is like she didn't listen to her gut. Because I can say I didn't listen to my gut.
Right.
I shouldn't have married my first husband as soon as I did. My sister and I were planning the engagement party, and my stomach was telling me that something was wrong. And she said, you don't feel well. Are you sure you want to go through with this?
Really?
I was young. Yeah, I was young, and I was blindly so in love with him, and he was so in love with me. I mean, I could say that about our first marriage. We were crazy in love. There's no doubt about it. And I was just too young to understand. Listen to your gut. So this is why I say that her message may have had better intentions, but the way it came across could have been heard differently, which could be dangerous for some of us that are going through this can be the most difficult thing you ever go through.
Yeah. It was a little confusing because I think one of the points she was trying to make was, she was being asked about a prenup, and she's like, I don't need that. We're not going anywhere. It's going to be fine. And then she's like, I should have had all those protections. But in the same hand, she's like, but I also didn't feel like I felt like I was doing the right thing by marrying him. But there were other little nudges that it wasn't the right thing. So I was ignoring him. So it's like, maybe you do depend on the paperwork. But at the same time, if she had just trusted herself in the first place, then she wouldn't have even been writing a prenup,
Right. Maybe there was something there that, and I don't know because I haven't spoken to her and I haven't had the chance to question her or assess her, but I wrote that in my notes too, right? As she said, have difficult conversations about like premarital should be mandatory. I agree with her. Absolutely. You should be able to have those tough conversations. But again, that's where you go with your gut, right? And I think in today's world, it's okay to say, I've worked for this and I want to protect it. And if you really love me, you'll just accept that it's okay if I don't want to give you half of everything I've worked for yet. Now, I don't know. I mean, those conversations need to go so much deeper. But again, it's probably just leaning into your gut and your intuition, which is something a lot of us don't even know how to do because the ego gets in the way very easily.
It's really hard. And I think most people that end up in that kind of position, that's just something that they haven't worked much on. Cause like you shared that you were just so in love, and that's the feeling you move toward. And you're like, I'm just going to ignore all the other things, because right now he's reflecting so much of what I love about myself. And it's so passionate and feels so good. And we'll just do that.
And he really was like, he had this unfortunate, like, minor side to him that was extreme enough for me to leave.
Mm.
But the thing is, I didn't know how to fight. So I would push him. The one thing I learned from that marriage is don't nag anybody, right? I didn't know that. I was young.
Yeah.
So I would just push and push and push and push until I got what I wanted, or I got something I didn't. Doesn't mean he's not responsible for his actions, but that's how I showed up. And that wasn't okay.
Right. Yeah. And but what I always say, like, we think about what we're protecting our children from, and that the most important thing that we can do to protect them is our own growth. And you held up the mirror, like, how did I play a role in this? And that's amazing. And so brave of you to do that. And taking ownership of your life and what you're creating is really beautiful. That's the work I did, was like, what is my husband trying to show me here? How am I playing a role? And I was mean and critical, and would, when he did something that didn't meet my expectations, then I was mean, and then he'd react to that. And we were just creating what I was experiencing. So I want to ask though, I know that one of my biggest fears, because when things were rough with us, I wanted to protect my children. And he was not abusive in any way, but I knew from things he'd said, I felt like I would have no control over protecting my children if we were to divorce. And so half of what Bethany talked about was doing what's right for my kid. How do I protect them despite the court order? So how do you navigate that now? Or did it disappear with you out of the the dynamic?
Wait, what?
Does it disappear? Like, we're with you out of the picture, is he a different person with your children than he was when you were together? Like, how does that work?
Hopefully you can edit this out, please.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Poor thing. She's sick and
I'm not sick. I just have these long-term symptoms, I guess, but thank you for being understanding. Okay. So, wow, there's so much that can be said here. So I also had taken notes on that. Okay. There is a fine line of fighting for what's right and what you think is right. Okay. A lot of us get into a winning mentality. Yeah. I have to win. A lot of us get into a protective, which I would say is more the moms. I don't think a mom is saying I have to win. And I will say nobody ever wins. There's nothing about winning. The only people that really make out is the divorce lawyers. Everybody loses in divorce something. But also when it's a bad enough situation, you gain something, right? If it's not right. So evidence shows, this is in the American Pediatric Psychology, that a child can be raised by one good parent and be successful and be okay. So your question was, what do you do if you don't feel like the father would be maybe safe even to that extreme? Because that is what some of us have to go through.
How do you protect him if you're not physically present?
So That's a great question. That's really hard to answer because staying to protect your children, I wholeheartedly believe, is not protecting them. It's creating a pattern and the thought process for the child to think and absorb, because they do what we do, not what we say. So the child is going to absorb that this is okay. Right? So if there is abuse in the house, now I'm going to go to the extreme. I'm not going to talk about your situation, if that's okay for a minute. I'm going to go to the extreme and say that there's abuse in the house, physical, mental, even sexual. You cannot ever 100% protect your child from that if you are living in the home. You think you can, but you can't. It's not reality. It's an illusion. If there is that sort of abuse, if you leave, that's when you get to start protecting your child for at least a portion of the time, because you start helping them understand mentally what's okay and what's not okay.
Right.
And you give them a safe space to develop emotionally well, right? So their brain can literally develop in a healthier way when they have that place to go to. Just like most children that live at home and their parents are married and it's a high conflict marriage. Where do kids love to go? School. Typically they love to go to school, but when they get older, unfortunately, those children sometimes can turn to something else besides school.
Yeah.
But back to your question is, you have to let go of the control. And that is really hard to do, but you have to know, am I staying and doing it? You have to know, is my staying doing the right thing? Because what is that child going to learn? They're going to learn to either be treated that way or they're going to treat people that way.
Right.
We're all born innocent and we deserve to have a parent that shows us the right way.
Yeah. That holds those boundaries. I mean, it's just a boundary to, protect yourself and move away from behavior that doesn't honor your worth. And so you're saying that she moves away from that and shows them what she deserves, how she needs to be loved. And that possibly, even though she thought she was protecting them before, that wasn't really the case. But at least now, part of the time, they have a safe place, which I think there is a good thing to that. That is great. And that's exactly what you should do. Abuse.
And
it's hard though.
And she's teaching them how they deserve to be treated and what they deserve.
Now if only the courts would go along, with them. What do you think about that? Because why can we even allow them to, why is it okay to say, well, half the time you're going to be in this, but maybe it's not as bad. Like we think it's bad. I wonder if
so one thing that I would like to say.
I love dogs. So
okay. Are you okay with it being on your YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dogs are welcome.
So what if you leaving makes, okay, we know that if we're staying in a relationship and we're doing the same thing every day and nothing is working, what if leaving and becoming a role model to your children motivates the other person to become a better human being? What if?
Oh, I think that every time we hold a boundary, it motivates them because it's painful. Every other time we don't hold a boundary keeps them comfortable and they don't have to face their own growth.
And these people that are competitive, right? And I want to be the best parent.
Right.
And I want to win that child's love because something wasn't fulfilled for me as a child. So I need that from my child. They don't know this. It's a subconscious
Right.
behavior
Yeah.
pattern. They will do everything they can. This is what I see from experience and with my clients. That parent will do everything they can to be the better parent, monetarily, but also sometimes, most of the time, they will change a little bit their actions. I'm not saying they're really changing who they are, but their actions will change. And I know this from my own experience. And like I said, clients. So when I was, let's say, with one of my ex-husbands and I talked about breath work, they would have been like, what?
Right.
What are you talking about? Right? But then one day, my daughter tells me that her father knows how to breathe or breathe calmly. I don't remember her verbiage, but I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I'm not even saying that he, got it from me, but maybe he got it from her and she got it from me. That's what I'm imagining. There are so many wonderful things that can come from setting a boundary. I do have to say, I don't support getting divorced unless there is some sort of abuse. And I think you should have your own choice if you are absolutely miserable. But I really, really do encourage people to try to make it work. And I think that's why your work is so important. Because what your work, from what I know, very little of it, but from what I do know, is in alignment with what I talk about, which is, let's talk about how you're showing up.
Exactly.
Because there are relationship coaches out there that say the same thing in a different way. They help you change how you show up, and the man falls in love with you. And it's not because you're changing who you are for him. You're changing who you are for you so you can be happier.
Right.
And like attracts like. So I do really appreciate the work that you do. And I do think it's very important for women to look at themselves first before they decide to leave, and make sure that they know.
There's so much work that can be done. Usually I don't work with women who are being abused. I would send them to you, but divorce is just a boundary and not like some portal to happiness. Just because you leave him doesn't mean you're going to instantly be happy. That stuff just follows you. But if you're in a situation where no matter what you do, your worth cannot be honored, then you do have to move away from it. And I think we maybe talked before, sometimes that separation can be temporary because maybe that is painful enough that he changes. If you come back
exactly.
Yeah. I saw
People
a quote. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I saw a quote just last night. It said something like, a queen doesn't demand respect, she commands it. And I feel like that's what I do with women. In fact, my program is like based on the journey of becoming a queen. I'm like, you walk into the room with an energy that I will be respected. And that's what that's what you then co-create, is this relationship of respect. And I think that sometimes we repeat patterns where love to us was, I will be disrespected. And that's what we show up as. Like, I'm going to make you comfortable, and I can be your, like, hopefully not literal punching bag until you feel better. And then we can all be happy. And that just doesn't work for adults. But I think you give so many people hope who would be in that situation when you do remind them that that's the model they need, and that you still give them that safe space when you can, and that things could change. And I don't think in Bethany's case, she says that she literally couldn't leave the house other than to rent something. Do you have any insight on that, just from your background, where that was tied up and she couldn't actually.
I mean, so I don't know her specific situation, and I do understand that there's so many different laws when it comes to divorce that are unfair, unjust, do not make any common sense.
Right.
And there are movements that are working in progress to change this. It will take time, but that's a positive thing that I love to share. I don't know exactly what she means by that, because when somebody says, I can't do this, or I couldn't do that, what I hear her saying is, I wasn't willing to give up my living situation, even if it was not the greatest environment. And I disagree with that perception. And that's how I perceived it.
Yeah.
I can say that I left my both of my husbands. I gave up every material thing I had. And my first marriage, that was a lot more, because I had worked for a lot longer before I was with him. But it wasn't a care in my mind. I had a beautiful home. We actually lived in my family's home that we were renting and going to buy.
Oh, wow.
And I left that home and I gave it all up. I didn't care about the home more than I cared about my baby being in an environment that was peaceful and calm and no arguing. And it was with my second marriage. Now, the second marriage was different because it was originally his residence. So that was really the right thing to do. I'm not saying it was done the right way. I don't think that the support was there that I should have had, but that's okay. It's in the past. So I left with nothing but what was special to me and my kids. And so that statement right there, again, it's a dangerous statement to tell people, because, well, why couldn't you leave? Could you not leave because you thought he was maybe going to take your life, and so you should have went to a shelter? Or could you not leave because you weren't willing to give up all that you had worked for?
Yeah. I mean, I know she
and that's
work and has
go
a
ahead.
multi-million-dollar apartment. And then I was thinking, well, maybe it's because they said the money situation hadn't been worked out. So I was like, maybe all the money was in their name collectively and she just couldn't spend the money. But then later she ends up buying a house in the Hamptons. So I don't know. It does sound more like she didn't want to give up her brand new, beautiful apartment and thought that, I don't know. But
let's say she couldn't spend the money collectively, right?
Yeah.
Then you go and get help, and you put you and your child in a place where there's got to be somebody that would have given her a room.
Yeah, it was very confusing. One of her examples of the awful things that he did was, she said, when somebody climbs in bed with you and asks if you're okay. It's like, I don't know that I would qualify that as like a terrible thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm not there, but it seems like.
Right. Maybe she was just so scared. I mean, I had an experience with mine where it sounds kind of similar, where there was no trust, and I was definitely afraid of what could happen.
Okay.
And your bed is like, you want that to be your safe space, and like the one place where, right? I mean, I feel like right now, if I don't feel well emotionally or physically, I'm going to go crawl in my bed, because that's the one thing that's just going to make me feel good, that I've made real comfy.
Yeah.
So maybe that was, and again, that's where I think her storyline, her storyline and the way she reveals it is very elusive. Like, you don't know enough detail to truly understand, was it him or was it you?
Right.
Well, it was both of you, but So that's just, I wish that there was more compassion, but I understand she's not in the compassionate phase. She's still, in my opinion, from the way she was speaking, she's still in a state of anger.
Yeah.
And you need to feel through that.
Yeah.
And she needs to honor that. But maybe looking back, she could say, you know what? Maybe that wasn't the best time for me to put all of that out into the world. So I just want to say, I take accountability for that. Like, I don't judge her for it.
No.
It's more just about, hopefully she learns and understands, like, you got to be careful when you tell people things. And the other thing that I didn't love was and maybe I should be more vulnerable with my story, because when I tell my clients the thick of it, they're like, that's so helpful to know. Like, if you got through it, I'm going to get through it. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I'm very aware of the fact that our child may be able to one day look at this. And so that's not fair to create something that changes the experience of the child for the other parent. That child has the birthright to have their own experience with that parent. So that's really a fine line. And I think she crossed it, in my opinion.
That is a fine line. I think it was probably a good thing while it was going on. I know he did like a gag order and stuff a lot. I think that the for me and ours, a lot of the things that my mom said about my dad changed how I felt about him. And that really wasn't fair. And I don't know, he still created what he created with us, but I think it is tricky to hold that balance of, empathy for their experience and like parental alienation, because you don't want to like not encourage them to have their own relationship, but help them to, I think, help our kids to just be aware of what is that relationship really for you? What's it between you two?
You're right. You're right. What you can do there is you can teach your children what healthy relationships look like.
Right.
And what boundaries are, so that when they have the experience that in your mind is not okay, you've given them the tools to figure that out on their own.
Yeah.
My mother would talk about my father a little bit when she was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
For not too bad, but a little bit. And I didn't like that. My father, never once did he say anything to me bad about my mother. And I used to sit on a nightly basis and wait for mommy to come and pick me up, because she would call me and say, I'm going to come and get you, honey. I just got off work. And she would never come.
Oh.
And I would just sit there and cry. And he never said anything. He never said, well, he could have said, well, she's not coming, Nicole, come on. Right. I mean,
really?
Right. I mean, but he didn't. He just was there for me. And he just let me get through it. And so I think that with what you say is what you brought up is that we do want to be able to tell our children what's wrong and right. Just as if you were married, I'm sure you and your husband have disagreements, right? Where you're like, I really don't agree with that point of view. And I think it's healthy for your children to see healthy debate and say, and this is why I don't agree with it, right? Mm-hmm. Like in some homes right now, you have two doctors, one's chiropractic, one's a psychologist, and one is pro-vaccine, and the other one is anti-vaccine. Yeah. But they're coming together in a healthy way in front of their children. So we can come in front of our children and say, how does that feel to you? Is that okay? I don't think, no, I don't think it's okay. Is it okay for you? And then, well, what can you do about that? Well, why don't you tell the other parent, tell your parent, your dad, your mom, that you don't like that. And so you teach your child these amazing life skills at such a young age that by the time they build other relationships as adults, they're going to know what's healthy and what's not.
Oh, that's great point. Because we get our identity wrapped up in what we think and believe as kids. We're just born that way. And then the ability to not be threatened by what somebody else thinks and believes is a very mature place. We actually had this discussion last night because my husband, this kind of blew my mind, but he's like, well, I probably would have voted for Trump. Have you ever heard Biden speak? And I'm not a Trump fan. So I was like, what? What? And I really wanted to just get into it with him. And I'm like, I need to learn more about why he thinks this way. It blows my mind because have you ever heard Trump speak? But like I need to just allow that to sit there. He's entitled to have that. And he's got a reason why he thinks that way. And but that conversation in front of our kids is so good because they're at 5 and 7 having discussions like, well, why do you like chocolate? Because yellow cake is the best. And like they get really wrapped up into it. So it's good for them to see that. So yeah.
It is. And it's so important. Another thing that I wanted to say is that, so she did mention that she was grieving. So that's good. So she does mention that part. She says she wants to make sure everyone knows how bad divorce is. Divorce doesn't have to be bad. I think it's good for her to say it can be terrible, but it doesn't have to be terrible. And some of the decisions that you make are going to decide whether it's that terrible or not. And she also said that she considered herself an expert, so people don't go through it. And just because you go through a divorce doesn't make you an expert. I'm not an expert just because I went through a divorce. Now, it helps, it adds. So I do have a lot of experience, but it's also because I stuck my head in a library and I have continually for the last decade read, researched, assessed. That's what makes somebody an expert. So I found that off-putting. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that we're experts at what we achieved. So she's an expert at fighting for 9 years and then finishing your divorce. She won. It was a battle. It was
okay.
It was 2 egos.
And maybe that's exactly what she meant.
No, well, I think she has some good points about advocating for yourself. Like she talked about, she said, lawyers don't make things happen. Lawyers execute what you need to happen. She said, I drove the entire process. She had 20 binders with tabs. I don't know about your opinion, but just in some other legal stuff we've done, I know that was really important that we, that the court isn't really here to serve you, I think is the message I've got. Like they are here for a process and you kind of have to be a part of it and not just put all your faith in the lawyer to get you or your child what you need. But I don't know if you have a different opinion.
Absolutely. She is absolutely spot on with no one is going to advocate for yourself or your children like you are.
Yeah.
It is an absolute process where the lawyers have become numb. One lawyer said to me, it's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
That's what being a family lawyer is like. So I think that speaks it. They don't understand things because maybe they just become numb to the process. They see these two adults fighting like little kids.
Yeah.
They don't actually see the children. And so I tell my clients, one of my modules is you are the CEO of your divorce. You have to be the CEO.
Yeah.
Not only in the court system, but in your daily life, you have to decide how many hours you're going to put towards it, how many hours you're going to talk about it. I mean, there are so many things that are so important that we lose sight of because we're so overwhelmed, especially as mothers. We just want to protect our babies. And one thing I can say is follow your gut, protect your baby, fight for what is right. Yes, Bethany is right. But make sure you've analyzed what you think is right.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be amazing if women and men change their mindset to, well, I not only have to become the CEO of my divorce, but I could in the beginning become the CEO of my life and really take the reins and stop repeating what we know and stop repeating patterns and learn, get in the library. I'm a huge fan. I believe that we grow through reading and relationships. I'm like, read a book, people. These are all
Right?
these books that will tell you what to do in this situation. But
Right?
yeah, it takes
It's
time.
true.
People don't have
It does. And I think, especially for people that are in a marriage with children, I mean, we're just trying to make it as moms as it is without stress, right? Like, my gosh. And especially, I can't even imagine having, a baby or being in this situation like some of my clients are right now during a pandemic. And I think there's a lot of grace to be held because they just don't know, right? They don't know what to do because they don't have the capacity to think, because as a mom, we're just so worried about our children and protecting them and making sure that we do what's right. But that's why giving up control is a really important thing. And having that faith and having a higher being and knowing that you aren't alone and that you have something to lean into, whether it's God or the universe, many gods, whatever that looks like. I think that's really important.
Mhm.
How do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicole, I know that you and I are both here to serve. We are not in a business to profit, as I know that you and I both want to help other people get to a place where they feel more connected to their source, more healthy, more happy. And that I really think that we need to encourage people to seek support. This stuff, this is your entire life. Every outcome that you have is related to this work. And go get the help. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or you can't do it by yourself, but you, like you just said, you don't have the time, the bandwidth to even, you're just like getting through the day. So go to Nicole, go to somebody who can help you get to this result, hold your hand through it, somebody who's been there. Like, lean on people other than your friends and family and your insurance provided therapist who sees a bunch of people and is kind of numb themselves. Lean on a coach, lean on somebody, even if it's just a life coach who can listen to you. Reach out for that support.
Yeah.
Women don't do that. We think we got to tough it through and be martyrs, and can't
And
do
there
that.
are so many other resources as well, if I may. Like, there's you, there's me, but if you are in a place where you don't have any resources, then the beginning is there are free resources out there for you.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So,
And all coaches will do a first call free. So go through 30
yeah,
coaches if you have to get your first call free and
right.
get some support. But yeah, give it to
Yeah.
yourself. That's, I would say, the number one thing if you're hitting a rocky spot in your marriage is go get some help from somebody who really is passionate about your personal growth and not just the outcome, because it really is about that accountability and looking inward. What do we need to do? So
Yeah. I've read your book and I haven't completely finished it, but it is, there's a lot of good information in that book too. So I like how like our work aligns, even though it's not, exactly the same. I think like what you said, what we both want for the family is for everyone to be
yeah,
well mentally and healthy, thriving, and living
care
a
about your
life.
kids. I always say, like, your child is my client. I'm here to help your child have a healthy experience out of all this. Really, that's what I'm
Yeah,
passionate about.
I love that because that's the same for me. Like, that's where my heart goes the most. And it I mean, it starts with the parent, right?
Right.
So I think if
If
we
you
could go straight to the child and fix it, we would, but
right.
the
Well,
parent is the one that has to do the work.
And if you don't have a child, I mean, I always say, like, look, I'm a huge advocate for not getting divorced because I know that can lead to your work unless you're in a physically abusive relationship. But if you don't have a child, go. Just go ahead and get the divorce and go do your work on your own and then go find somebody new. I mean, not always, but it's like really the time when it's most important for you to grow is when there's a child watching you. So if you're with somebody who's awful and you don't have kids, yeah, then there's less pressure. You can go if you want, but still do the work. Don't have a kid with them. Don't have any sex at all. If you figure this out. I don't know, but she's like, okay. But thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, no, I have 2 daughters.
Don't you think, like, if they don't have kids,
yeah, I wouldn't say leave necessarily, but I would say go do the work on your own.
right?
Like, go figure your stuff out because it could be you. I mean, it could be you. And maybe, that relationship doesn't work, but at least, you went and did the work, and then it's either going to help that relationship or you're going to be ready for that next relationship when the right one shows up.
Well, I think that the fastest way to do your work is through the reflection that a relationship gives you. So the fastest way to heal is stay in it, unless you're being abused and you need to hold that boundary. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I read these women, they're like, well, he's got 5 women on the side and he doesn't do anything at home. Should I stay or should I go? And they don't have kids.
Oh my gosh.
Well, just go.
Yeah, like,
it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, I feel so bad for them because, like, for me, I always tell a guy when I'm dating them, and I am in a relationship right now, but like that's kind of, and I've known him forever. He knows this about me. I'm like, the easiest way to get me to like not be attracted to you is to tell me that you're like even interested in another girl. So I feel so bad for these women that, gosh, that's gotta be really tough.
It is.
Yeah, because somewhere when they were a little girl, they weren't chosen and they're trying to be chosen, right? And that's heartbreaking. It's easy for us to say, right? Like, yeah, girl, get out. But that's where they need to come hire you or me.
Right.
And or somebody, right? It doesn't have to be us. That's one thing I always say. If I'm not the right person, we know plenty of people that are, but
yeah, I say anyone who joins you in blaming the other person for your unhappiness isn't qualified to help you yet. You really need somebody who's like, okay, but let's look at you. Let's just take this back and see why it's bothering you. I'm sure he's got his own stuff too, but the first place, let's look at you.
Little different with my work, right? Because some of the stuff that I hear from my clients, it's like, okay, well, I know that's your side, but oh, wow. It's like, yeah, I mean, they still have to make the choice. I don't tell them what to do, but yeah, I'm sure that's where our work is very different, right? Well, they tell me things where I'm like,
what are you tolerating? What are you willing to tolerate? Why are you tolerating it? So it's still, I mean, he's still maybe doing something unacceptable, but why are you there? Let's figure that out first.
Of course. Yeah.
What is it about?
Of course.
I think you're so good. I'm so excited. And thank you for watching that interview and giving me your feedback. I thought it'd be a good way to get your opinion on these things because they're so challenging. And I really, we have so much love and compassion for women who are in these situations. It's so much easier to talk about when things are good. When you're in the emotions, it's a challenge. So we really,
and I'm grateful that you had me listen to it. I think it was just a great, I think it was a great podcast for me to hear, to understand even just what people really go through, kind of remember again, like what I went through and how I handled it. And so it was, thank you. And just, of course, great conversation, I think, for us to be having in the sense that we're so close, but still different. And so it brings a lot of light to how I serve. So I'm grateful for that. I feel like I'm constantly learning from you, like having you in my journey. So yeah.
You too. I think I'm really appreciative that you've been so honest and shared openly, because I do get people who say, well, because I try to be vocal about what I believe in. And I don't always give the caveat of like, unless you're being abused, because I just think like those are my people. So then I have people who are triggered by things I say and like, but if he's doing this, and it's nice to know what that experience is like and what those people are thinking. And it's very nice to know now that I can just say, I have somebody for you.
Right. And the
This is
same
who-
for me, right? If I talk to somebody and they, let's just say they think it's abuse, and I'm like, not sure that that is abuse, then I would send them to you, because my sweet spot is really
Yeah.
helping those. I'm learning that more. It's really helping those that are before, during, and after. So,
Yeah. And
I'm
really,
happy to send those women that want to make their marriage work to you, so you can help them. Not that I don't want marriages all to work, but
right.
I know that's your specialty.
I love your necklace because I do feel you were sharing the other day about holding a client's hand through leaving. And I feel like you really are just an angel to them. I just see like light beaming
Oh
out
my
of you right
God,
now.
that's so nice.
You're
Thank
really who they
you.
need during that process. So I'm glad that you exist. People like you.
Well, that was a very nice compliment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I do
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you for being here, Nicole, and for giving me your time when you're dealing with the, these after effects of COVID stuff. And I appreciate it. And thank you for your open, honest sharing. It's really good for us to have these conversations. So thanks for being here.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Thank you for having me. And I think we should continue to have conversations. I think that hopefully we could help others, and potentially maybe you could come on my podcast if we feel like there's something to talk about there, which I don't see why there wouldn't be.
Oh, I'd be honored. I'd be honored.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys
Right.
again for watching, and we'll see you next time.